I'm going to tell you about what we are doing in the area of geography, what we call multi-layers or SD maps. I'll tell you what we've had for quite some time, and we have this in SD apps. Whenever we want to show a map and we want to show simple geometries, that is dots, we have this with a property, the control type SD map, and it would open up many properties. One of them is the location attribute, and that's a coordinate, and it's longitude and latitude. And we've got two ways of specifying it. As from version 15 of GeneXus, this attribute could be, as we called it at the beginning, the domain, the geolocation domain, a string with latitude and longitude, or a geopoint variable, which is a type of a specific data that our database understands, where it stores specific data. So if I've got a grid where I would see a list, this is the example that you're also seeing in the lab. You're seeing cultural activities. If I set this property, I would get a map with different points. Now the values of those points have the geolocation or geopoint attribute. Now what started happening is that there were many clients asking us for this type of application, any transport application, Easy Taxi, Uber, Cabify. They've got something like this. The main app is a map, and the map's got an icon that is fixed. Let's see if it moves. Yeah, it does a little bit slowly. But basically, I've got a map with an icon in the center, and it's the map that moves. Now, when I move it, in some way, it gives me the position where I am. Now, obviously, these applications allow me to make a search. I can look it by places or by geocodification. And then when I press a button or make any action, it shows me the road between my position and the position I entered. This is a way of navigating apps that is quite frequent. We used to have something quite frequent in what we call the pig location. That was our PROM, our map PROM. If I wanted to catch a position, I have something similar, but peg location returns a value. Now the value is in the app, and I'm doing something then with that value. So what we did is that we tried to abstract that behavior and simplify them a little bit. That's what we tried to do in GeneXus, to simplify and abstract that. So we've defined two properties. When I've got the control type of SD maps, apart from many other properties, I have one new one which is called the selection layer, which does this. I can define an icon in the center, and for that I will have a property saying what's the image I want to give to that icon, and it will define the class that that image will draw. Now, when I've already selected the layer and on my grid, I'll see the points loaded, but also this type of navigation. And the other thing I'm going to have is two events. On the one hand, this event is triggered when I know I don't longer press, and you're going to have the position where it's left. And the other one is that it's triggered as I move. With these two events, the basic thing is that this is an entry variable telling me the position where I am. Now, I could draw road Y or save this value in my database. The other property for this behavior is the direction layer. Now, the direction layer, in the same way, when I had an SD Maps contract, it was showing me for every geopoint that I had entered in my grid, it showed me, for instance, the cultural attractions, instead of showing me the cultural attractions, it's going to draw the road joining those two places. And it's also going to give me two other properties. The first one is the transportation type, whether that road I'm going to do it driving or walking or by bike, or I've got a couple of parameters there. And the other one is the class. And I said I want it red and quite thick. So basically, with these two properties, I made this example of transportation. I'll tell you how I made it. But apart from the direction layer, the possibility of showing the road between 2 points or more, we created a new external object. Now, this external object is called maps, and it's very similar to the geolocation standard object that we've had for several versions in GeneXus. When smart devices generators started, we created this property, control type a smart device for grids, and another one called geolocation. That as a standard object, it allows us to obtain the position of the device, to start a tracking, to calculate the distance between 2 points. There are many functionalities involved. Now, the entry of that standard object is always what we called a string. And we are about to migrate that to a point, for instance, that we released in our version 15. This is just to give you some context. Now, this external object, among other properties, has the property calculate direction. I could say origin, destination, and transportation type. And this other one, which is not in the grid but could, which is giving me more than one group, alternate groups between those 2 points or n points. Now, when I call that method, I'll have an event which is called direction calculated. In codes, it would be something like this. In that button, I would indicate the road. What you could do, instead of using only the property of the grid, you could do it with a standard object and calculate directions between the 2 points. And in this event, the directions calculated will give me a list of the routes, a list of geolines or other data as well. And the other new feature, well, I could keep that route in my database, or I couldn't share just a file and send it to someone. The other thing we added in version 16, which is the draw geoline. If I put a geoline in that grid and I'll say how I want it to be drawn, it would draw a line. Now, these two things are available in version 16. In Android, in the first upgrades, it will be there. Because of a lack of time, we couldn't include it, but it's there already to be included. Now, just to think about how to go about these things, this transport application and how I did it. Well, in my case, what I did was not to use the standard object. I used the grid properties. And although I've got a table with all the places of interest, this is the only one that's going to show me the direction between the 2 points. And I put in a grid in an SD panel. This is the search, which is geocodification. That's something we've had for quite some time. And that grid includes the selection layer on as a property. So when I open the panel, I'll have the icon in the center, and I will be able to move. Now, what do I do in my panel then? Now, the first thing when I enter the panel is I insert my position, because in this example, I want to show them where I am and up to the place of interest I want to go and what's the road. So I will save. As I said, this is the standard object geolocation. I will save that position on my table. then in the control value changed, this is what the user will select. And in the user element, I have added the destination of the table. I turn off one, and I turn off the other one. This is just to give you an idea of how it works, how these two properties, these two new properties work. Let me tell you that we are also working on another layer, which is the animation layer, and that will allow me in between 2 points or on a line to animate an icon. The typical thing in transport applications is where I find the fleet of taxis or the liveries around me close by, or it makes an animation from where I am to where I'm going, with a little car moving. That's a user interface that are necessary, and we are including them in these grid properties. Now, what other things have we been doing at geography level? Well, we continue working. We've been working for quite some time in having more and better providers. Cartography providers for iOS, we had Apple Maps, and for Android, we have Google Maps, and we have AutoNavi and Bayou from China. And what we've done is we have rewritten all the iOS properties for Google. This means that in any main object, I'll have an Apple Maps app, and I'll be able to ask to choose Google or to continue using Apple Maps. We are going to continue working particularly with the web. The way we have to have a web cartography is through web control, which is quite old. We are managing some providers, but early today you've seen the control object. We are using this user control that you're going to use. We are rewriting the map control basically with the same functionalities, but we are trying to add new providers. New providers that, maps of, we're going to be adding open street maps. And I've got a question. Can transport type be modified at runtime? Could you use the same key of Google Maps for Androids and iOS Maps? No. Let's see. What key? Maps key. What for? Because we've got 2 keys in here. No, but when I enable my program, I have the possibility of choosing providers of maps for Android and for iOS. No, it's at the level of object. You have it at the main level. Yes. But I can compile for Android and iOS. Well, I can't remember that very well. You're not taking it from other place. But yes, any questions there? Yes, you can? Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's using the same one. But there is something else, and it's interesting here, particularly with Google. Right now, Google has changed its APIs, and it's got APIs to draw maps, APIs for directions that we're using here, and there is another API for places. So it split it in 3 APIs. And so you can give authorization to your API for each one of these things. So you can have 3. At present, we've only got 1. If you want to use maps and directions in your API, you have to configure both things. But it's just 1 key, right? Yes. We could have 2 because you could have them separated because of question of costs, because there was a change in policy in Google Maps in June that went from having 25,000 requests per day to 28,000 per month. So the policies change a lot, and that's making a lot of noise. There is a very strong movement with other providers. But at present, we've got this API just for simplicity sake. Yes, but the answer is yes, you can use the two.